Hello, I'm Robert Royal. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Catholic Thing, which is a daily column series that is published online 365 days a year. You can subscribe for free to The Catholic Thing by going to www.thecatholicthing.org. I'm here in Rome, and we're drawing near to the end of this first year of the Synod on Synodality. Late October. There'll be a second session in October of 2024. And I thought at this point in the development of the Synod that it would be good for us to hear from Father Raymond de Souza, who is a Canadian and a priest and studied here in Rome, and I think has been writing some of the most incisive commentary on the Church and the whole synodal process over the last few years. You probably see him if you read Catholic journalism in the National Catholic Register and also many other places. And he's been doing a series for us of kind of a diary of reflections about the Synod. So Father de Souza, welcome. It's good to have you with us this morning. We're recording on Wednesday, October 18, and you'll be seeing this on October 19 or later. Before we get into any specifics, because there are lots of specific points that people are interested in, of course, I just wanted you to react sort of in general terms, because you're still in Canada. As I understand it, you're going to be coming over here in the next few days.
Next week.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of wondering what's your bird's eye view from your perch of what's gone on so far?
Well, thanks for having me on, Bob. It's good to be on this, my first time on your video cast, I guess you'd call it. I'm professionally, as you are, obligated to follow all of this. So, I read every day what's going on and so forth. It doesn't really seem to have leaked out very much into general interest amongst the Catholic faithful. There was an exception at the very beginning, just before the Synod began. The Holy Father had some responses to the dubia questions on women's ordination, same-sex blessings. That got a lot of attention, obviously, around. But it's proceeding. People know it. We have prayers of the faithful for God's guidance of it. So it's not really making an impact on the ground. From a distance, to me, to have a assembly that's supposed to talk about how to have assemblies, or how to, we've kind of mocked it as a meeting about meetings. Well, that's maybe too harsh, but it's about structures. But you're not going to get intelligent people together for 3 weeks just to talk about how to do things. They're going to want to talk about substantive issues. And so we're seeing that leak out. It's not supposed to be about substantive issues, doctrinal matters, moral matters. But what else are they going to talk about? So I don't judge them harshly. Well, if I was there for 3.5 weeks, I'd want to say something too.
Yeah. I want to quote you a passage from Cardinal Holerich's speech this morning in Rome. Hollerich is the Relator General, it means sort of the general reporter on the Synod as a whole. And he's starting the last segment of this Instrumentum Laboris, which is a working document that guides the participants through various subjects. They're starting, this is sort of the concluding section for this week. And he says, in a kind of funny way, we shouldn't be like school kids who the last week of school kind of slack off, that we really need to stay committed. And he admits that it's been grueling and it's been tough. But he raises this question about governance. And I think a lot of people think that this is going to be a kind of a crucial question in the long term, because whoever is going to be able to make decisions is going to be able to decide about those hot button issues that we've all heard about. Let me just read a section of his message to you and get your reactions, Father de Souza. He says, there are 5 points in this last section. The first of the 5 points in this section of the Instrumentum Laboris concerns the renewal of the service of authority. It is certainly not intended to question the authority of ordained ministers and pastors. As successors of the apostles, we pastors have a special mission in the Church. But we are pastors of men and women who have received baptism, who want to participate and be co-responsible in the mission of the Church. Where clericalism reigns, there is a Church that does not move, a Church without mission. Clericalism can affect the clergy and also the laity when they claim to be in charge forever. Clericals only want to maintain the status quo because only the status quo cements their power. Mission impossible, he says. Thoughts about that?
That's maybe the eighth version of the Tom Cruise franchise, Mission Impossible, Synodality, perhaps. uh, Look, if synodality means that clerics don't run everything or don't demand control everything, then fine. But that's been the way a long time. I'm a priest. My main work over the last 20 years has been on the university campus. There, my main collaborators and consultants were young people, men and women in their 20s. In my journalism, all of my editors and supervisors, EWTN, National Catholic Register, First Things, whatever, are all lay people. Your institute is not a clerical institute. So the reality of priests running everything, controlling everything, just hasn't been the way it's been for a long time. And certainly, if you think of the most dynamic things, say in the United States, you think of Father Mike Schmidt's Bible in the Year, you think of Bishop Barron's Word on Fire, they're clerics. But those entire enterprises are lay enterprises. They might be the face of it. So where you find this desire for clerics to run everything and exclude other people from meaningful participation, did it happen in the history of the church? Certainly. And in certain cultures, it probably was a great problem. I don't think it's an issue in the more vibrant parts of the church today. I just don't see that. Now, there is a point about we are an apostolic church, which means the successors of the apostles have a special role. And Cardinal Hollerich says that at the beginning of that statement. It always makes me nervous when people in authority, whether in the church or elsewhere, state things that are obvious to everybody, because the reason you do that is because maybe you think it's not obvious to everybody. So
Right.
anyway,
Right.
we'll see.
There's that very interesting way he puts this here too. It's the renewal of the service of authority, which can mean just about anything. But I guess they intended to mean just about anything, because pretty much what we're seeing is everything is up for discussion. And although we're told things are not going to be decided, they're only going to be discerned. In fact, things seem to be discerning in a certain direction
Right.
as we go along. There's a famous passage in an Italian novel called The Leopard that says it's in the midst of a revolutionary war down in Sicily, and one of the protagonists says, well, now everything has got to change so that everything can remain the same. I'm not so sure that that's a danger at the Synod right now, but do you detect, I know you've been kind of very sensitive about the way that this Synod is inward looking when it is talking about being outward looking. Do you detect any kind of outward dynamic coming out of this at this point, or is it still mostly an internal affair?
Well, I've heard that passage before from the leopard. I'm not really sure. It sounds very clever. I'm not really sure what it means that everything changes so that everyone can stay the
It's
same. I guess
Sicilian.
what it means is that you've got to adapt things so that you preserve the core for us Catholics, the gospel. So you can't present the gospel in the 21st century like you did in the 11th century. Fine. I don't think that's a very controversial thing to say. But in terms of inward looking and outward looking, at least what it seems to be is that the synodal process has been the pressures of the world coming to bear on the church. We hear very little about the gospel being if you want to say pressure, we would probably say leaven or a evangelist of the culture. For example, we hear very little critiques. Now, proviso, I don't know what they're saying in the groups, and neither do you. But what comes out is what's the pressures from the world on the life of the church, and very little about the need of the world for conversion. I've commented before that this all has a very 1970s feeling to it. And there was a great slogan, more in the Protestant world than the Catholic world in the 1970s, which is the world sets the agenda for the church. And it kind of feels a bit like that. We hear almost nothing about how the worldly culture around us needs conversion. So it does seem very inward looking to me.
Yeah. There also seems to be, we talk about confusion and ambiguity on the part of the Holy Father, but it seems like it could be very simple to solve some of these hot button issues. But he likes to kind of keep all the balls up in the air, at least while the synod is going on. And in past synods, when many of these issues were discussed also. In the end of the day, he ends up not kind of taking the more progressive position. And so it's going to be curious to see if that continues to be the pattern going forward. Let me just read another section from Cardinal Holerich's statement of today, because he's looking forward to what's going to happen when people go back home next week. We're going to get a written report. There's going to be votes about it. Accepting it, it'll be presented to the Holy Father. Here's what he says. He says the final thing that they're going to have to be considering in the next module that they're working on is, once back home, we will be called to a twofold task. On the one hand, we will have to disseminate the results of this first session involving the bishops' conferences, reconceiving the synodal teams, activating the approximate forms of communication, the appropriate forms of communication, and the media available to our communities, preparing the path of experimentation and in-depth study that we'll identify together as appropriate, and so on. On the other hand, we will immediately have to start planning how to collect the feedback from the local churches, the fruit of the exchanges, and the experimentation and deepening paths, so as to arrive prepared for the second session. Now, there are not a lot of specifics there, Father, but we understand that something is going to come out of this and being taken to the churches, and the churches are going to have a second shot at input. What do you think that is going to look like over the next year? Because there's a whole year now.
The synod organizers very much desire to be exhaustive, but I fear it's just going to be exhausting for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There's already been many stages of consultation. If I might just propose a kind of a metaphor, if you had a meeting to discuss the divinity of Christ in a synodal fashion, the only people who would really go are those who might want to have some questions about it. Those who believe what the church professes in the creed, they're not interested in that. It's a kind of a settled issue. So the very nature of these iterative synodal processes is that they draw people who wish to change doctrines or morals disproportionately. That's what you see. There's a kind of a irony there, because actually people who are engaged in the work of mission evangelization, the third of those three synod themes, usually are engaging in a very synodal way. They're working collaboratively with lay people. The whole community is engaged, the chaplaincy, the parish, the institute, whatever it is. And so a lot of synodal activity goes on, if that's what synodality means, outside of this bureaucratic process. But I think at the end of the year, we'll have more of what we've already seen, is that those people who think, contrary to what the Holy Father and Cardinal Hollerich and others say, who think that this is a chance to change doctrines and or moral teaching, they will be fully engaged in the year ahead, and people who don't want that won't be. So I think we'll be where we are now with more intensity a year from now.
Yeah. There very definitely is some of the divisions that we're seeing that are coming out in the debates have to do with, just to take America as an example, our bishops elected a slate that is more traditional. The Holy Father appointed a slate coming from America that is more progressive. And that sort of thing, I think, has been reproduced in various places. And of course, exactly as you say, people who are already doing it. And I think the odd thing for us as Americans and others who may be listening to this and don't know America is that America already does seem to practice, and I think Canada is somewhat the same way, some of the very so-called synodal things that others have been proposing. So maybe this will have some good effect in some places that need to open up a bit more. For us, it seems, in many cases, it seems to be obvious that this is what the church has to be doing at this point in history. So, Father, anyway.
I think one thing I'd keep our eye on in the year ahead is, in the background to all of this universal planetary synodal process, is the German synodal way. And that's kind of just been on hiatus while this is going on. But that's where some very clear decisions will have to be made, probably in the next year. So it may be that the Holy Father will choose to sort of delay all that for another year, but I don't think that the German synodal process is inclined to be patient.
Yeah. Father, our time is up, but that just means I'll have to invite you back another time to continue.
Great, happy to do it.
after you've been here in Rome and had a chance to experience this synod on synodality firsthand. So thanks a lot, and thanks all to all of you for watching. We'll be back soon with news and commentary as it begins to emerge again from this synod.